have this characteristic that they're hardy. From a psychological standpoint, adversity, challenges, setback, failure, they handle it well, they handle it with ease. In fact, they welcome it and they try and create it in some senses. They want to make choices that are tough and difficult. They want to put themselves in tough and difficult positions. They're very hardy. And psychological hardiness is composed of three components. It's composed of an element of challenge, an element of control, and an element of commitment. And I'm going to share stories and examples on all of them. And as I do, I can give you ideas and hopefully spark some ideas, and I can give you theories and principles, but it's how you take those and apply them to yourselves. That's where the gold is. And I can't possibly pretend to know everybody's circumstances in here and what individual needs you all have. So as I talk, you have to do that needs assessment. And then try and draw the parallel between what I'm saying to your particular situation. And since we're talking about challenge and control and commitment, I'm going to start with challenge. You're going to have to fail. You're going to have to make mistakes. It comes with the territory. And in fact, the bigger your dreams and the bigger the things you want to do and the more inspiring you want to be, the more you need to fall down. The more you're going to get hammered. If you come to me and say, hey, you know what I would really like to do? I'd like to win the Nobel Prize in physics. Right? First thing, my first reaction is I'd get excited. That's fantastic. I love ideas like that. Right? And the second thing I'd say is, good. Are you ready to fail hundreds of thousands of times in a laboratory? Because any great scientist will tell you that discoveries come out of failure after failure after failure, trial and error. Right? You fail, you tweak it, you fail, you tweak it, you make changes, you make modifications until, bang, you hit it. And one of the guys that knows this better than anybody that I've ever met is Michael Jordan. Interesting thing about Michael Jordan. You look at this guy, and a lot of people say he's perhaps one of the best players ever to play the game of basketball. He's number one in NBA history in only one category. You know what it is? Missed shots. He missed more shots in his NBA career than anybody else. Now, he's number 2 and 3 and 5, and he's in the top 10 in a lot of categories. But the one he owns is missed shots. And it just so happens it's the one he's most proud of. He'll talk to you all day about championship shots that he missed. The reason he's so exceptional, in my book and from my research, is that he looks at this and he recognizes the value of making mistakes. Right? It makes him hardy because he's welcome. He says, hey, look, I'm going to be on stage in front of millions of people, at least through broadcasting and television. And this is what I tell my clients all the time. If you really want to find out how good you are, we're going to know the day when you finally are willing to fall flat on your face in front of millions of people. As soon as you're willing to do that and say, oh yeah, bring it on, that'll be fun. Fun, falling flat. As soon as you're willing to do that, then you're ready to do something completely exceptional. In fact, Michael Jordan has taken this record and he's turned it into a lot of money. He made a commercial with Nike. I don't know if anybody saw it. It's a black and white commercial. He's in an arena, but he starts in the visitor's locker room, which is small and cramped and so forth, and he works his way up into the big arena, and it's dark, and so as he's walking along, it goes from dark to light, right? And then it's quiet and lonely down there, and he goes up into an arena that's filled, 30,000 people. So you got all these metaphors for changes as you go on along in time, and he's walking along, and it's printing at the bottom of the screen failures of his. And as he's going along, the failures are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And he's got a voiceover. You hear his voice telling you what sort of mistakes he's made. He starts out, in my career, I've thrown so many X number of balls out of bounds. And in my career, I've had so many turnovers. And in my career, I've lost so many games. And in my career, I've missed so many shots. In my career, I've missed so many game winners. In my career, I've missed so many championship game winners. And missed so many NBA championship game winners. He goes on and on and on and telling the numbers. And finally, right as he's ready to walk out in the arena, he's walking out, it gets bright white, he puts up his hands, right? And then you hear the voiceover saying, in my career, I have failed more than anybody else in NBA history. The crowd goes crazy, and he fades off into the light, and then you hear, that's why I'm the greatest. And then, of course, it goes to a blank screen that says, Nike, just do it. Right? And Nike's cashing in on that. Pretty smart thing to cash in on. Because most of the people in our population, they'll spend a lot of hours every day and every week trying to figure out how to avoid failure. trying to figure out how to minimize their mistakes, trying to figure out how to take the safe and cautious path, how to do it the easier way. Where the champions are saying, no, safe and cautious and easy, right? That doesn't cut it if I want to do something exceptional. That's great at getting me into the middle class. If you pick out the safe, sure, easy path where there aren't going to be a lot of failures, there aren't going to be a lot of mistakes, it's very predictable, right? You'll get just that. You'll get safe, easy, and predictable. What's the tougher path? Because the tougher path, by definition, stretches you, pushes you, makes you solve problems, right? And as you solve problems, and ours are stretched and pushed, you grow and you learn and you develop. The human brain is a product of habits. Every time you do something one way or say something one way or think a particular pattern, right, the neurons that were involved in creating that activity fire. And then if you fire them again, they strengthen and they get more neurochemicals, and over time, right, you can actually make your brain anatomy change by repeating something enough. That's how habits form. Well, same thing works for the way we think, attitude-wise. And so if you write down patterns of habits, and you see, hey, during the day I'm spending X amount of time thinking about what I don't want to have happen, or X amount of time thinking about what I'm disappointed in, or X amount of time thinking about I wish it wasn't this way, then you're training your brain to think that way. Guess what we know about the human brain also is that under pressure, our most dominant habits come out. Anybody in here have the quote-unquote bad habit of biting your fingernails? Hand goes right up, right? Not afraid to volunteer that whatsoever. Most people are like, yeah, I have that, but I'm not putting my hand up. Right? It's this little social stigma that's bad. All right, biting your fingernails. I can think of a lot worse things. If I wanted you to bite your fingernails, I could make that happen easily. I just take you and put you in a high-pressure situation. Right? When you're under pressure, your habits come out. You start biting your toenails. I travel around the country giving the anti-stress management talks. Because almost every company everywhere now that has a human resources department has stress management programs, and they teach people how to remove stress, and it's a lot of kumbaya, and it's nice. Right? Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not entirely against stress management. However, in a lot of cases, we've gone way overboard with trying to eliminate stress from our life. And what that fails to realize is that there are multiple kinds of stress. There's eustress and distress. Eustress is good for you. Distress, obviously, is the worry and the negative brain chemistry and so forth that causes graying hair and wrinkles and gaining weight and so forth. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Where when your body releases cortisol, it has a lot of negative impact on our health and so forth, and it's the enemy. We want to get rid of cortisol. And yeah, you want to reduce cortisol as much as possible. But you don't reduce cortisol by taking away stress. This is a misnomer. In fact, we've been doing some research at the Texas Medical Center looking at the relationship between stressful environments and situations and the stress response that the human beings have. And guess what we found? It's very interesting. You take folks and you put them in a stress situation, an exam, a physical performance, public speaking. Public speaking is the big one. In fact, the research shows that people are more afraid of speaking than they are of dying. So when someone says, I would rather die than speak in front of a group, they mean it. Right? So we put people in a public speaking situation where there's a big audience, but the audience has evaluation charts. Right? So now you make a stressful situation, and then we take people and we put in those situations. But we've changed. Between the control group and the experimental group, we make the change. One group, the control group, we explain to them that this is a difficult situation and that there's going to be high evaluation and there's penalties for not scoring well. And in fact, the room's going to be a little hot and it's going to be uncomfortable. Right? And we get, before they go into public speak, we get them focused on what might go wrong and what they're not going to enjoy and what the downsides potentially are and where they might fail. Right? We get them focused and thinking about all the stuff that won't be good for them. The other group, we explain to them all the upsides. We explain to them what's going to be fun about it, what they can potentially learn, what they can possibly gain out of it. Right? And we put them in a situation to lead them to believe that, hey, this is going to be great. So we have the same stressor, the same environment, stressful situation, but they walk in there with two different perceptions. One is the perception is this is negative, it's something to worry about, something, right, that has potential downside. The other walks in thinking this is a growth opportunity, this is going to be great, they're going to get a lot out of it, there's lots of reward. And then we measure their cortisol release. And the group that walks in with the negative assumptions, their cortisol spikes right through the roof that we'd associate with a stress response. The other group walks in, no raise in cortisol. Stressful environment, no stress response. So we find cortisol and stress and this stuff that the whole stress management movement in our country, right, is trying to combat, like it's the arch enemy, is in fact not stressful environments. It's not challenges, right? It's not difficulty, it's not potential failure and so forth. It's your interpretation of the environment that causes the negative physiological changes. And if you interpret the stressful environment as something that's potentially positive, you can get something out that's going to be fun, and you look for it as a problem-solving game or puzzle or whatever, then you have a whole different physiological response, such that then the stressful situation helps make you better, and you get a lot out of it. Nervousness is not stress. When you get butterflies, or your mouth gets a little dry, your hands sweat a little bit, right? That's nervousness. Guess what nervousness is? It's your body shifting energy from parts of your system that you don't need to use in that given performance to other parts of your body that you do need. So if you're going into intellectual tasks, your body is shifting blood and glucose and oxygen and nutrients from your muscles to your brain. If you go into an athletic situation, it's shifting blood and glucose and oxygen and so forth from your digestive system and some of those things you don't need into your muscles. Your body does that naturally. And because it's a rapid shift and it's a lot of energy and oxygen and blood, it's a lot of stuff that's positive and it happens quickly, you feel it. And you feel it as butterflies. You feel it as sweaty hands or something or other. Those are all signals that your body is now prepared to perform better than it was before. You have this adjustment. Unfortunately, the perception piece, in our culture, we train people to have a misassociation. It happens when you're a little kid, in fact. When you're 5 or 6 years old, usually sometime around then, you have your first experience with performing in public. Whether it's their first Little League game, or being in a school play, right, or playing in a little school band, or the very first time your teacher has you come up in front of the class and give a book report. Well, the very first time you're in any of those situations, you make a bunch of mistakes. You're nervous, and usually it's the first time you ever feel butterflies, for example. Right? Teacher asks you to do this book report, right? You prepare your little note card, you get help from mom or dad, it looks really good, you got the right things to say, right? You've prepared well, and you're sitting there, and the teacher calls your name, and all of a sudden, this lump in your throat. Right? And it's the first time you've ever felt anything like that before. So now you have this lump in your throat, which is foreign to you, and your body's doing something you've never felt it do before, and then you get up, and you stutter through this, or you forget to say something, or you mispronounce things on the card, and you go sit down. Same sort of thing. Your first Little League game. Right? You feel these butterflies, and then you go out, and the ball rolls right between your legs. And you assume that I was nervous, so I made mistakes. Right? And we connect the two. When what happened? Why'd you make mistakes? Because you were 6. It's the first time you'd ever done it before. You're not a professional speaker, a professional athlete, or a professional musician, or a professional actor. It's the very first time you've engaged in trying to do something like that. So therefore, you're a novice performer. Therefore, you make mistakes. But we don't, as little kids, usually in our culture, we don't have someone saying, hey, nervousness is great, and the reason you made mistakes is we just need more practice at the skill. So without a lot of good advice, we just connect the two. And then as your life goes on, you have more and more opportunities where you have to perform under pressure and you maybe not do so well, and we assume it's because of these feelings that we're having. And that adds to this interpretation that stressful situations are bad and I can't have them. If I want to lead a healthy life, I got to reduce stress, try and get rid of it. It's not the case. The great performers will all tell you the more stress you can add, the better. In other words, right, and they don't mean stress in terms of worry and doubt and distress, right? That's a psychological interpretation. What they mean is put yourself in situations that are challenging, that are testing. Who in here plays golf? There you go. Of all you golfers out there, a little hoo-ah from anybody that what you like to do when you go and play with your buddies is put $5 on the game. Yeah. Yeah, we can go play golf, but it's sometimes a little more fun if there's something riding on it. Right? Because then you can talk a little trash with your buddies and, there's more to it. Interestingly enough, the better you get as a golfer, the more you want to put something on it. Why? Because the better you get at as a golfer, right, the challenge level of the task, and maybe I shouldn't use golf because you can play it your whole life and it still is a heck of a challenging game. Right? Maybe I ought to use like darts. Right? Any skill, right? Public speaking, take public speaking. The better you get at a skill, right, the easier it is for you to do, the more, if you really want to enjoy it, you got to raise the stakes. Right? But raising the stakes means you're adding more to it, creating more opportunity, more potential for growth. This is what we're talking about with being psychologically hardy and this element of challenge. Right? The great performers is, they say, you got to turn it up a notch. You got to increase the stress, increase the pressure. Because they recognize pressure, that is real opportunity. If you're just sitting at your desk and you're safe and comfortable, you don't have nearly as much opportunity as someone who's putting themselves out there. If you're in sales, for example. Right? You can make 1 or 2 calls during the day, or you can make a couple hundred calls during the day. If you make a couple hundred, it means you're going to get a whole lot more rejection. Right? And who are the most successful salespeople? Yeah. They say, I love that rejection stuff. Because every time I learn something. We talk about learning from failures. It sounds cliche, but it's very true. And I hear a lot of parents, when I'm talking to classes at Rice, I'll tell students to go after something that's crazy. We talk about being realistic with this mentality. I say, well, what is being realistic? Being realistic is justifying negative thinking. And so I tell students all the time, tell me what your dreams are. What do you want to do in life? What sort of places do you want to make a difference? Do you want your name in the record books in any sort of industry? And students are hesitant to tell me because they're used to, if they really share this, people put them down. Or they tell them, who are you to think you can do that? Right? Spud Webb, who are you to think you play in the NBA? You're only 5'4". He played in the NBA and he was an all-star in the NBA. Right? Yes. And he won a slam dunk contest at 5'4". The amount of hours he put in training his calves and his springs, people say he must have gone and got something mechanical inserted in there. He was just, right? Yeah, he had some talent genetically, but he had the most talent of all, which was heart and willpower and the willingness to fail. Okay, we spent a lot of time talking about raising the bar, level of challenge, how pressure works in our system and so forth. It's one dimension of psychological hardness. You've got to fit 3 things together. The first, obviously, is take a look at what you do. Take a look at what you want to do and see where can you raise the challenge. Where can you raise the pressure? Where can you put yourself in tougher situations? Start making decisions based on which is the tougher path. If you've got 2 puzzles in front of you, which one's going to be more difficult? Because here's the interesting thing about the way the brain works, is that our level of, we spent a lot of time in just in the last couple of years in psychology talking about this concept of engagement. And being more engaged in what you do leads to better results, as opposed to traditional forms of commitment measured by just the number of hours you work. If you work 8 hours a day, you'll get your butt kicked by someone who's working 6 hours a day that's more engaged. So when you're picking the tougher path, you're demanding that you have to think more and you have to analyze more and you've got to really get into it because it's tougher. Otherwise, you're not going to figure it out. So this level of engagement's key. And that the more you challenge yourself, the more difficulty. Think about the people that work around you and work for you. If you got tasks your employees need to do, or your colleagues, and you go and you give them a package, okay, we need this done by 5 o'clock, we need it done this way, boom, here it is. Here, go do this for me. They're much less engaged than you say, hey, we got this problem to figure out, I don't know how to do it, but figure it out. Now, not only have you given them ownership and responsibility and all the things that we know are effective, as leaders, but they've got to problem solve, and they've got to figure it out. Their brain has to be active, they've got to plug in, they've got to be engaged, they've got to put more of themselves into it. As a result, they're going to perform better. Well, you can do the same thing for yourself.